Welcome to the Talking Toughness series of podcasts, where we examine the mental toughness concept with guests from a wide range of sectors, illustrating that our mental approach to what happens to us and around us matters for all of us. Our guests come from the worlds of business and public service, education, social mobility, sport, and health. They all share their experiences and their observations about the factors that have enabled them to survive and to thrive on their journey through life. Many guests have gone further and incorporated the concept into what they do as coaches, trainers, managers, and leaders, helping others to thrive in their turn. Their experiences are valuable to those of us who strive to do the same. Our guest for this pair of podcasts is Karen Walker. When I first met Karen, I was struck by the questions she asked, sometimes challenging, but always seeking to explore and understand what we could offer to her and her colleagues in, frankly, an important organisation with some unique challenges. What I came to appreciate was just how thoughtful and careful Karen is in developing strategies to help people thrive. As a result, what she applies works, and where problems arise, she can find a solution quickly too. Now, some of this can be explained through a background in customer service with blue chip organisations, but it's mostly down to her own motivation to do an important job as well as she can. And with that goes an openness to ideas and approaches. John and I are delighted to welcome Karen and really appreciate her willingness to share her thoughts and her experiences with us. Welcome, Karen. It's lovely to have you here as one of our guests.
Thank you.
Well, is it a bright and sunny day where you are?
Sadly not. It's July the 14th, 16 degrees and light rain. So it's as good as it's probably going to get for a dull Friday in Yorkshire.
Oh, that's a Yorkshire summer for you, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a heat wave.
Right. Well, we're really delighted to have you here, Karen, because we've been doing some work with you and your colleagues, and there's been a kind of an impressive aspect of it, of your work that's emerged. As we were talking earlier, often we find ourselves having to introduce new thinking to our clients. But in this instance, we've found a client that's already thinking about where organizational development and individual development should go, and particularly that the two have to be connected to be effective. So the first question, Karen, is where did your approach come from? Where did this thinking emerge from?
So it probably came from a 2015, 17 and 19 general election, to be really honest. So I've been at IPSA for 3 years now, and when I joined, we were in a washing machine of chaos, is probably the politest way that I could put it. When we have general elections, it impacts greatly people joining and leaving, MPs joining and leaving our organisation. And there's a lot of work to do to wind up affairs and to bring and educate new MPs and their staff. So there was some turmoil. And whilst people got through it, I think it's fair to say that resilience was waning. And actually what was missing for us was the positivity. So how can you have that Dunkirk spirit and be really mindful of the impact on health and well-being mentally and physically of people being under significant pressure, sustained pressure, versus how you can think about things in a different way to get different results. So Bex and I, one of my colleagues, started exploring that. We've done lots of things in terms of culture over time, but there's a soft culture in IPSA, and resilience, I think, was being tested in ways that is probably unusual for an organisation just based on our purpose and what we're here to do. That meant we needed to think about this in a very different way. And we were looking for speakers for an all IPSA day last year that we wanted to bring people together, a lot of us are hybrid. We wanted to bring people together face to face for the first time since COVID and do something with them that reached out on the resilience point, but in a positive way. And I don't think we chose the right opportunity. We were introduced to mental toughness through another organisation, and we loved the concept, but the delivery was a little bit hard. So it was very focused on being mentally tough and not the positivity element of resilience. So, and nor did it pick up on mental sensitivity. So it was quite Marmite, and people either loved or hated the mental toughness concept at the point that we delivered that last October. And since then, obviously, we've grown and found an organisation that we really love working with, because it is about building resilience and positivity.
Oh, that's fantastic. When we talk about joining individual development to organisational development, what we've found, and it's been quite useful, there's a piece of research that just come out from the University of Oxford in March 2023. So it's it's bang up to date. They looked at resilience and wellbeing programs in 143 UK organisations, and they found that none worked or none produced significant results, and that some actually did more harm than good. And one of the things they established was that there was a lack of connection between what the organisation does and the individual. The emphasis on the programs was the individual has to become tougher, or the individual has to change in order to live in this organisation. The organisation doesn't have to change. And of course, that is not the right way to proceed. And we kind of know that, and very few people do anything about that. So can we talk about what you've been doing to kind of get the organisation to change and respond to the employees? And then we'll look at what you're doing with the employees.
Yeah, so I think we've just developed a whole IPSA approach. Fascinatingly, when you look at mental toughness, and we've learned an awful lot over the last 6 months, particularly around mental toughness, when you look at that, there's a spectrum. And, we don't expect everybody in IPSA to be mentally tough. There are some sensitive souls, and it's right that we appeal to those people and give them coping mechanisms and development areas to bring them to a place where they're really comfortable dealing with uncertainty and volatility. And that's the world we live in these days, in work and outside of work. It's incredibly volatile with the cost of living and other things. And I think when you look at people's development and it's individual, it becomes really personal. And we're not experts. So, you bring in resources, and hopefully resources that resonate with people, or that will resonate with them in the future when they've got over language, for example. Because when you talk about toughness, that conjures up lots of images for people, and not all of that is positive. But actually, when you start talking about organisational growth, it becomes a very different kettle of fish. So what we've talked about is whole IPSA. When we got our results from doing the assessment, we looked at functions. We did directorate result sharing rather than team sharing, where it starts to get a little bit more personal. The smaller the teams that you share the results of. So I think the whole IPSA approach has been really useful. There are personal development conversations that we have with people. I've just finished my 10 reviews that I've done for my direct reports. And, we do get into that detail of personal development and what's right for that individual. But actually, this is about what's right for IPSA, for our stakeholders, our customers and our people. And therefore, that whole IPSA approach has worked over the last 3 years.
Fantastic. I mean, you're quite right to talk about the individual approach and the language. Well, I mean, ever since we got involved with the mental toughness concept, we've had a challenge with the language. Thankfully, it's a lot less than it used to be. Believe me, people used to respond quite firmly to the term toughness. But I think we've managed to turn a corner, and a lot of people are beginning to understand that we're not talking about good or bad. We're not talking about strengths or weaknesses. Yeah. And we're beginning to get the message that actually being mentally sensitive is simply who you are. And there are things that you can bring to the party that sometimes the mentally tough can't. Yeah. And so it's about, to coin a phrase, being the best version of you that you can be. And the organisation's challenge is to harness that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think that's a message that's getting through to the staff in IPSA.
Yeah.
How do you see the staff responding to that sort of approach?
It's been a really interesting journey. And we talked to people about the elephant in the room, because the Marmite approach in the first place, where it was more about mental toughness than a spectrum, didn't land very well with 50% of our people. We got some really interesting feedback. Do I really need to take a cold shower in the morning to be mentally tough? Because that was where the focus had been. And we talked about, when we talked about revisiting mental toughness in the right way, we talked about the language giving people the ick, because that was the response we were getting, and at senior leadership level as well. And a lot of the negative response was to the word toughness, and the fact that it felt a bit macho and aggressive and domineering and showy, and that's not at all what this is about. So we started to change the language internally. We would never steer away from mental toughness. Obviously, it's a concept, it's the right concept. But we talked about bounce back ability to people, and rebounding, being capable that life can be difficult, that it's full of opportunities as well as threats, and starting to shift some of that thinking to what's possible rather than what's not possible. And there has been a little bit of a can't do attitude in IPSA in the past, which is why mental toughness suits us really, really well. So when we start talking to people about being sensitive in their own skin and having inner strength to deal with whatever life gives you, work-wise and personally, and we talked about sensitivities and strengths, then we started to get over the word mental toughness. So we did an awful lot of work about that. And we talked about other kind of personality questionnaires and assessments that people might have been through before, and the benefit they got from that, and that this was different, but that they would benefit. But we also took them back to the feedback that they'd given us. So we've been out on several occasions, surveys, people surveys. We do an annual one, we do 3 quarterly pulse surveys as well. And we wanted to talk about self-awareness and to allow people to develop the tactics that help them thrive, rather than, they get a really hard time because they're under pressure and there's some volatility at work. And we've talked a lot about blockers and confidence in IPSA, and, issues that people have had in the past. There's a bit of a legacy of how the organisations operated previously. But we looked at self-confidence, open-mindedness, creative problem solving, having difficult conversations, supporting growth. And then people start to resonate and think, actually, I could benefit from this, but I do understand how the organisation will benefit from this as well.
Okay, so nice to say hello again, Karen. So really, from my perspective, I've talked to a lot of people in IPSA, and it's one of the most complex and interesting organisations I've worked in. And to borrow your washing machine of chaos analogy, I think the colours have run. It's we have a situation. And it's trying to get the grips from your point of view is the people you're working for, certainly come across as deep thinkers. So absolutely, I can see why the initial shot at making it black and white bounced back, because the people I've talked to are very nuanced. So it's really pleasing when we talk about sensitivity, because, my thinking and Doug's thinking have developed over 30 years, where I used to be a bit more black and white. The more I do, the more complex, and the more we're trying to bring in that full potential. So looking at your culture, how would you describe it to the listeners? Because I can genuinely say it is unique. My starting point is it's a disparate group of interesting people working together. So I don't know what your thoughts are.
It is. And when I first joined, it was all very central London based and not diverse. And we serve MPs, and there are 650 constituencies, each serving on average 70,000 people. And we weren't reflective of that. So, when I joined the organisation, we talked about regulation or service, but we're here as a service provider and to regulate. So you've got old school thinking around, well, I'm a regulator, and other people thinking, well, I'm delivering a service. And all my life, working life, I've worked for regulated industries where you deliver both. So you do it within guardrails. And I think we've been in a massive space of black and white in the past. It either fits, spending fits with the scheme, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you're not allowed. But life's not like that. And whether it's work or home, ups and downs, we're moving to a very different approach around risk and principle-based regulation, which is far away from where we first set up. But I think because we have looked at whole IPSA and we've had that approach, because we like puzzles, not problems, and when you create a puzzle, people want to get around the table and put the edges of the jigsaw in first, and help get the framework before the mess inside the jigsaw, and that picture starts to become a little bit clearer. I think we're thriving, and we've measured that through people surveys, and the mental toughness assessment has helped us to understand where we've got growth opportunities as a whole. And we can break some of that down into different departments where we need to help focus them on their development needs. But I think it's a really diverse and inclusive organisation, and we do celebrate difference. So we wouldn't want everybody to be an 8 on the mental toughness scale out of 10. We reflect that difference, and so we should. So all we want to do is support people to be the best they can be, as we've talked about here, as Doug mentioned earlier. And a thriving culture is based on that difference. People being engaged, and we've still got people who are not engaged. We've got phenomenal engagement survey results, and we've really seen a shift. But there are some areas that are just really sticky. One of them's collaboration, for example. People feeling they don't know what other people are doing, but that diversity and inclusion is really, really important to us, and therefore we should celebrate and support everybody regardless of where they are on that spectrum.
Yeah, you've got an excellent turn of phrase. I do like the washing machine of chaos and puzzles rather than problems. That sums up my conversations with your good folk. Can I ask a specific question? A genuine question is, there are a number of sensitive people within your organisation.
Yeah.
And it's a very harsh environment, or it can be. Not internally, but for people listening, we won't break any confidences, but get a bit of hassle might be the understatement.
Yes.
So how are they coping? What do you pick up, and what can you do in the future? Because absolutely, it's not a problem to be sensitive. It's just a different route, and I think people I've talked to have picked that up. So how do they deal with that daily, fairly vicious grinding action?
So I think first off, and this is that whole IPSA approach again, it's not taking things personally. Our customers don't have an issue with individuals. They have an issue with what we do and why we do it. And not all of them do, by the way. Some are gracious about all that. So I think the way that we deal with that is making sure that people understand we're not doing any of this because we think people aren't resilient. We're doing it because resilience is something that they need to have. And, it's almost like a fuel tank, and you've got to keep an eye on the petrol gauge and understand whether you are a little bit drained and you need some filling up, or, you've got resilience in the tank and it's going to take you through. But it's being able to debrief after difficult conversations. It's about supporting people in how to deal with objection handling, and how to deal with resilience when it's needed, in the sense of tough, difficult situations that they're dealing with. And some of that can be a little bit contentious as well. And it's about us, we've got to fix underlying systemic issues that we've got around regulation and service and the things that we do, but it's helping people to cope with the volatility of a good conversation versus the next one's going to be really tough. So I think the positivity element of mental toughness is so important to us, that we've built some resilience. We've got to get to that thriving kind of culture that I've talked about, and the positivity is the bit that's really helping us to do that. So, what can we learn from the situation that didn't go well? Project management, we're on a transformation journey as well, and things, you take the rough with the smooth, and people can't always handle that. So how can we better help people to understand the lessons learned, which is success? Failure isn't a bad thing. Failure is learning. And so I would suggest we're back to that growth for IPSA, which is we all learn together and we work together and we see the bigger picture, which is one of our values. And we fix things together. Nobody's in this on their own. So wrap support around people, help them on an individual basis with some of the areas that they might want to improve on. We've got some brilliant resources through the work that we've done on mental toughness that can help that, and coaching people just to be better and better at what they do day in, day out, and that, just never take it personally. It's not about you.
Yeah, great. No, I always learn something when I'm talking to you, so I'll add that to my list of knowledge. But we're back to that, and I haven't thought about it in this respect, that idea of problem versus a puzzle, because the sensitive people are not a problem. It's a puzzle of how you maximise their well-being and their contribution. So, and if many organisations don't see it that way, the starting point is let's toughen everybody up.
Yeah.
The key is that self-awareness and respect, and in discussion about it, it's also about not being patronising. Sensitivity is equally as valid as toughness, but different needs and different approaches, and it is that individualised approach which is key, I think.
And as someone who scored an 8 out of 10 on mental toughness, I'm not sitting here going, "Oh, I'm brilliant. I'm really proud that I'm an 8." I've had conversations with you, Peter. I've got some sensitivities myself, and you've helped me considerably to start overcoming some of those sensitivities, because those are the kind of things in life, not just work, that trip you up. So having an armory of tactics and suggestions that can help people in situations is really useful. And IPSA as an overall ended up mid-scale, which I'm not surprised about at all, because we do have some mentally tough people, but being mentally tough has got its hazards as being mentally sensitive has, as much as both of those can be really good strengths as well. But it's understanding people, and if we talk org versus individual, understanding individuals, being self-aware, so what your strengths and weaknesses are and where you might need support and where you could support others, versus then others being aware of you and where you sit on that scale is really important. I've shared my results with my manager and my team so that they can help support me where I need it. But for me, it's about that sort of 360 approach. I really appreciate feedback. I really appreciate understanding me and the impact I might have on people. And there are people within IPSA that I think have benefited from being more self-aware and understanding the impact they have. And one classic question I always ask myself, and I learned this through a non-exec director role I do, is what's it like to be on the end of me? So it makes me think about what I do when I challenge people, and you pick up lots of tricks and comments, and I just think the more you know, the better you are at understanding, and then you can find things that help support you to be better just in life, just a better.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And my last comment when I passed back to Doug is, again, you alluded to there, it's the three-dimensionality. There's a working person and there's the outside of work person. And, when you look at issues, challenges, it's usually family, friends, mortgages, a whole range of other things, which I think a forward-thinking organisation has to think about. You can control what you can control, can influence some things, but from the conversation, you're always alluding to the complexities and the human condition, and I think that's the starting point. So anybody selling a quick answer when it comes to people is perhaps missing the point.
Yeah, and there's a real flexibility about IPSA, and again, it's developed over time, and that flexibility means that we cater for people with different needs, and it cuts both ways. We expect flexibility in return, but there's something for me about helping people thrive in life, and that includes work. There's a blur, isn't there, between work and life, and I'm not a different person outside of IPSA, apart from I never am the person to choose which takeaway we have on a Saturday. I don't make decisions on a weekend if I can help it, but I'm not different, and anything I learn in my work life I extend into my personal life, because that's about me being a good person wherever I am and whatever I'm doing. And for me, what mental toughness has helped us do is help people thrive, not cope. And that's big. That's really big. It's not just about getting through and surviving, it's about thriving. And I think that's really, really important for people, no matter what they're doing, where they are. And particularly at the moment with the external landscape just being really tough.